liberation of Cuba, the fights for independence in Africa, and the war in Vietnam. Older people grew up during the fight against fascism, during the Cold War, the smashing of the trade unions, McCarthy, and a period during which real wages consistently rose. Since 1965, disposable real income has decreased slightly, particularly in urban areas where inflation and increased taxation have bitten heavily into wages. This crisis in imperialism affects all parts of the society. America has had to militarize to protect and expand its empire. Hence the high draft calls and the creation of a standing army of 3.5 million, an army which still has been unable to win in Vietnam. Further, the huge defense expenditures required for the defense of the empire and at the same time a way of making increasing profits for the defense industries have gone hand in hand with the urban crisis around welfare, the hospitals, the schools, housing, air and water pollution. The state cannot provide the services it has been forced to assume responsibility for and needs to increase taxes and to pay its growing debts while it cuts services and uses the pigs to repress protests. The private sector of the economy can't provide jobs, particularly unskilled jobs. The expansion of the defense and education industries by the state since World War II is in part an attempt to pick up the slack, though the inability to provide decent wage and working conditions for public jobs is more and more a problem. As imperialism struggles to hold together this decaying social fabric, it is inevitably resorts to brute force and authoritarian ideology. People, especially young people, more and more find themselves in the iron grip of authoritarian institutions. Reaction against the pigs or teachers in the schools, welfare pigs, or the army is generalizable and extends beyond the particular repressive institution to the society and the state as a whole. The legitimacy of the state is called into question for the first time in at least 30 years, and the anti-authoritarianism which characterizes the youth rebellion turns into rejection of the state, a refusal to be socialized into American society. Kids used to beat the system from inside the army or from inside the schools. Now they desert from the army and burn down the schools. The crisis in imperialism has brought about a breakdown in bourgeois social forms, culture, and ideology. The family falls apart, kids leave home, women begin to break out of traditional female and mother roles. There develops a generation gap and a youth problem. Our heroes are no longer struggling businessmen, and we also begin to reject the ideal career of the professional and look to Mayo, Chef, the Panthers, the Third World for our models for motion. We reject the elitist, technocratic bullshit that tells us only experts can rule, and look instead to leadership from the People's War of the Vietnamese. Chuck Berry, Elvis, The Temptations brought us closer to the people's culture of Black America. The racist response to the Civil Rights Movement revealed the depth of racism in America, as well as the impossibility of real change through American institutions. And the war against Vietnam is not the heroic war against the Nazis. It's the big lie. With napalm burning through everything we had heard this country stood for. Kids begin to ask questions. Where is the free world, and who do the pigs protect at home? The breakdown in bourgeois culture and concomitant anti-authoritarianism is fed by the crisis in imperialism, but also in turn feeds that crisis, exacerbates it, so that people no longer merely want the plastic 1950s restored, but glimpse an alternative, like inside the Columbia building, and begin to fight for it. We don't want teachers to be more kindly cops. We want them to smash cops and build a new life. Photo 2, Bernadine Dorn announces the expulsion of PL from SDF. The contradictions of decaying imperialism fall hardest on youth in 4 district areas: the schools, jobs, the draft, and the army, and the pigs and the courts. A. In jail-like schools, kids are fed a mishmash of racist, male chauvinist, anti-working class, anti-communist lies while being channeled into job and career paths set up according to the priorities of monopoly capital. At the same time, the state is becoming increasingly incapable of providing enough money to keep the schools going at all. B. Youth unemployment is 3 times average unemployment. As more jobs are threatened by automation or the collapse of specific industries, the unions act to secure jobs for those already employed. New people in the labor market can't find jobs. Job stability is undermined, also because of increasing speed up and more intolerable safety conditions, and people are less and less going to work in the same shop for 40 years. And of course, when they do find jobs, young people get the worst ones and have the least seniority. C. There are now 2.5 million soldiers under 30 who are forced to police the world, kill and be killed in wars of imperialist domination. And D. As a youth problem develops out of all this, the pigs in courts enforce curfews, set up pot busts, keep people off the streets, and repress any youth motion whatsoever. In all of this, it is not that life in America is toughest for youth or that they are the most oppressed. Rather, it is that young people are hurt directly and severely by imperialism. And in being less tightly tied to the system, they are more pushed to join the black liberation struggle against U.S. imperialism. Among young people, there is less of a material base for racism. They have no seniority, have not spent 20 years securing a skilled job, the white monopoly of which is increasingly challenged by the black liberation movement, and aren't just about to pay off a 25-year mortgage on a house which is vulnerable because it's located in a